The last time I heard my son say "Mom" was when he needed money. The next time he came back, he brought my betrayal disguised as a hug. They say a mother's love is unconditional. For 63 years, I believed that. I lived it. I breathed it into every sacrifice I made. My name is Helen Ward. I live alone in a two-story colonial house just off the city center, in a neighborhood where children still play outdoors and neighbors know each other's names. The real estate agent who stops by every 6 months tells me this place is worth over 1.3 million now. I nod and offer her tea, knowing I'll never sell. This house holds 40 years of memories, some sweet, most bitter. My husband Thomas died when our son was only 7. Cancer took him quickly, leaving me to raise Dylan alone. I never remarried. Why would I? Dylan became my world. Every penny I saved, every extra shift I worked at the hospital administration, every coupon I clipped, it was all for him. For his future. For his happiness. These days, my only constant companion is Goofy, my miniature schnauzer. 12 years together, and he understands me better than any human. Our routine is simple. Morning walks around the block, afternoon gardening in my small backyard, evenings reading on the porch. Peaceful, predictable, empty. Dylan is 35 now, so handsome, with his father's strong jawline and my green eyes. Everyone who meets him falls under his spell, that charming smile, that way he listens like you're the most fascinating person alive. Your son is such a gentleman, they tell me. You must be so proud. What they don't see is how he started gambling in college, how I've bailed him out of debt 3 times, how I once withdrew $42,000 from my retirement account to pay off men who showed up at my door with veiled threats. I never told Dylan I knew. I just fixed it, like mothers do. He calls me about once a month now, usually when he needs money. After he married Bianca, B, as he calls her, the calls became even less frequent. I tell myself they're busy building their life together. I've only met Bianca a handful of times. 28, slim, always impeccably dressed. She works for a high-end event planning company. Dylan says she organizes galas for celebrities and charity functions for the wealthy. The perfect daughter-in-law, he told me at their wedding. I smiled and hoped it was true. Last Tuesday, my phone rang. Dylan's name appeared on the screen, and I felt that familiar flutter of happiness. "Mom," he said, his voice unusually soft. "I have amazing news." I settled into my armchair, Goofy curling at my feet. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Bee's pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." My heart swelled. A grandchild. After all these years of loneliness, a new life to love. "That's wonderful, Dylan. When is she due?" 6 months, he said. "But Mom, we need your help. Our apartment is too small, and there are medical expenses, furniture for the nursery." His voice trailed off. I didn't hesitate. "How much do you need?" He cleared his throat. "About 300,000. I know it's a lot, but—" "I'll transfer it today," I interrupted. The sum would take nearly my entire savings, money I'd put aside for 40 years. But what was I saving it for, if not for this? "Thanks, Mom. I've got to run. Bee's calling me." The call ended abruptly. "No, I love you. No, we'll come visit soon." Just silence, then nothing. I sat there forcing a smile, telling myself he was busy, but something felt heavy in my chest. And then I heard it. The call hadn't disconnected properly. Through the phone pressed against my ear came Bianca's voice, distant but clear. Finally, the old hag sent the money. My son's laughter followed. "She's too careful with her cash. Had to fake a pregnancy to get it out of her." The phone slipped from my fingers, clattering to the hardwood floor. The room seemed to tilt around me. Fake. Pregnancy. The words echoed in my mind as memories flashed before me. Skipping meals to afford Dylan's private school tuition, working double shifts to pay for his college, standing in line at food banks while telling him I was on a diet, cashing out my pension early to cover his gambling debts, the penalty costing me thousands. All those years, all that love. And in return, contempt. I sat motionless as the afternoon light faded to dusk. Goofy whined and nudged my hand, but I couldn't move. I thought of Dylan as a toddler, running across our backyard, arms outstretched, squealing, "Mommy," with pure joy. Had it all been an act? Had I been the only one not to see the script? For the first time in my life, I allowed the pain to wash over me without justification, without making excuses for him, without blaming myself. The tears came, not for the money. Money was just paper. But for the realization that my son had never truly been mine. His heart had always belonged to himself alone. As night fell, I finally stood. I wiped my face, straightened my cardigan, and walked to my desk. From the drawer, I pulled out an old leather notebook, a gift from Thomas on our last anniversary together. I opened to the first blank page and wrote in steady handwriting, "Counterattack Plan, Day 1. They thought I was a weak, aging prey, easy to manipulate. They didn't realize they had just awakened a sleeping wolf." 2 days after the phone call, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Goofy barked once, then twice. His alert for familiar visitors. Through the peephole, I saw them. Dylan and Bianca, standing on my porch with matching smiles and gift bags. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Mom." Dylan's arms wrapped around me in an embrace that felt foreign now. "Surprise visit. We thought we'd check in on you." Behind him, Bianca stood in a loose-fitting dress with a slight bulge at the midsection. The pregnancy charade continued. "We wanted to spend time with you," Dylan gushed. "After all, I'm going to be a father soon." Bianca stepped forward, her eyes bright with practiced warmth. "Mom, I've been craving your cheesecake. Nobody makes it like you do." I smiled politely, noticing how easily Mom fell from her lips. I invited them in, watching their movements with new eyes, the way Dylan scanned the living room, how Bianca's gaze lingered on the antique clock my grandmother had left me. "We brought you something," Dylan said, handing me a bag. Inside were bottles of supplements, calcium, magnesium, and something labeled sleep support formula. Bianca touched my arm. "You need to stay healthy, to be around your grandchild for a long time." I examined the label while they settled into my couch. The fine print mentioned temporary memory effects as a possible side effect. How convenient. "Thank you," I said, placing the bottles on the coffee table. "I'll start taking them tonight." Dylan launched into complaints about their apartment. "It's so cramped, Mom. Bad air circulation too. Not healthy for the baby." Bianca sighed dramatically. "The stairs are killing me, and the neighbors are so loud I barely sleep. You understand, don't you?" I nodded slowly. "Why don't you stay here? I can take care of both of you." The eager look they exchanged confirmed everything. "Really?" Dylan's excitement wasn't for my company, it was for my property. "That would be wonderful," Bianca added quickly. Then came what they really wanted. "Mom, if we're going to stay here anyway," Dylan said casually, "why not transfer the house to my name? It would simplify the paperwork, and you wouldn't have to worry about property taxes anymore." Bianca squeezed my hand with manicured fingers. "I'll handle everything. You just need to rest. You've sacrificed so much already." I kept my face neutral, though inside I felt ice forming around my heart. "I'll think about it," I replied with a thin smile. That evening, after serving them my special lasagna, which Bianca barely touched, no longer needing to maintain her cravings, I retreated to my bedroom. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Day 2. Dylan grabbed my wrist when I hesitated about transferring the house. His fingers pressed harder than necessary. Bianca surveyed every room, mentally measuring furniture and appraising valuables. The next morning, Dylan was suddenly helpful, making coffee and playing soft jazz music, things he'd never done before. Bianca baked cookies, bringing them to me while I was reading. I found this recipe online. Try one. On the surface, we looked like a loving family. Underneath, the air was suffocating. Dylan began reorganizing my refrigerator. Mom, these leftovers are too old. We should change your diet. He threw away containers I'd prepared just 2 days before. Bianca complained about the guest room. It's rather small, isn't it? Maybe we could move to the master bedroom instead? For the baby's comfort? I smiled silently, watching their performance. How long until the masks slipped completely? How long until they showed their true faces? I played along, agreeing to consider their suggestions, watching Dylan's eyes narrow slightly at my hesitation. I noticed how they never showed affection when they thought I wasn't looking, how they spoke in hushed tones behind closed doors. That night, I went to my bathroom to prepare for bed. The medicine cabinet door was slightly ajar. I always kept it firmly closed. In the soft yellow light, I examined the shelves and discovered an unfamiliar blister pack of pills with one missing. I closed the cabinet gently, returned to my bedroom, and locked the door. In my notebook, I wrote, Day 3, they've begun their move. Within a week, my peaceful home transformed into a stage where Dylan and Bianca performed their twisted version of family life. My quiet mornings with Goofy were replaced by the blaring sound of Dylan's sports highlights. My afternoon reading ritual gave way to Bianca's reality TV shows. For 63 years, I'd lived by my own rhythms. Now, I was a guest in my own home. Dylan began using my car without asking. I'd wake to find it missing from the driveway, the gas tank emptier than I'd left it. When I mentioned it, he'd shrug. Just running errands for the family, Mom. Bianca reorganized my kitchen, claiming to modernize my system. The spices I'd kept alphabetically were now arranged by frequency of use. Her frequency, not mine. My heirloom china disappeared into a back cabinet, replaced by plastic dinnerware she'd ordered online. It's more practical, she insisted, less likely to break. The living room gradually filled with their possessions. Dylan's gaming console sprawled beneath my television. Bianca's beauty products colonized the bathroom counters. Their presence expanded like a slow-growing vine, gradually choking everything that had once been mine. Yet in front of me, they maintained the perfect family facade. Dylan, who had never cooked anything more complicated than a frozen pizza, suddenly became a breakfast enthusiast. Every morning, he'd play soft jazz, whisk eggs, and slice fruit into precise patterns. Morning, Mom, he'd sing. Beautiful day, isn't it? Coffee's just how you like it. Bianca baked cookies and muffins she claimed to have learned from online tutorials. I brought you these, Mom, she'd say, appearing at my bedroom door. Made them just for you. I accepted their gifts with gracious smiles, noting how they never showed affection when they thought I wasn't looking. The loving glances, the hand-holding, the playful banter, all vanished when my back was turned. Their sweet words came with calculated purpose. Mom, I've never seen you looking so healthy, Dylan would remark while helping me down the stairs, his grip unnecessarily firm. You'll outlive us all at this rate. Bianca suggested a comprehensive medical checkup, just to be sure. She casually mentioned a clinic that works closely with our insurance provider. They have excellent elder care specialists, she said, her smile never reaching her eyes. One afternoon, I returned from walking Goofy to find Bianca hurriedly closing my desk drawer. She claimed to be looking for stamps, but I knew my personal records were stored there. Birth certificate, insurance policies, property deeds. The pressure about transferring the house became a daily ritual. This neighborhood is so peaceful, Bianca would sigh, gazing out the window. Our baby will thrive in a place like this. Dylan tried a different approach, feigning concern. I worry about what happens if something goes wrong, Mom. If the house was in my name, you wouldn't have to deal with all those property taxes and maintenance issues. I always responded with vague promises to talk to my lawyer or think it over. Each time, I noticed Dylan's jaw tighten slightly. After 2 weeks of their charade, I decided to set a trap. I've been thinking, I announced over dinner. I'll transfer the house after you've taken care of me for 1 month, to show your commitment. Their eyes lit up simultaneously. Of course, Mom, Dylan said, reaching for my hand. We'd do anything for you. Bianca wiped away a non-existent tear. That means so much to us. That night, I installed tiny cameras in the living room, kitchen, and hallway. I ordered them online with express shipping, hiding the package before they could see it. I needed evidence of what happened when I wasn't watching. It didn't take long for their masks to slip. Bianca stopped pretending to help around the house. I'm so tired, she'd complain, sprawled on my couch watching reality shows all day. The fake pregnancy pillow occasionally slipped, revealing her flat stomach when she thought I wasn't looking. Dylan became irritable, snapping when dinner wasn't to his liking. Why is there so much salt in this? He barked one evening. Don't you know my blood pressure is high? When I gently suggested they might use less air conditioning to keep the electric bill manageable, Dylan's face darkened. This is my house too now, isn't it? He shot back. Or at least it will be soon. I discovered more concerning signs. My vitamin bottles had been tampered with. The packaging looked identical, but the printing on the label was slightly different. The evening tea Dylan insisted on preparing had a faint medicinal smell beneath the chamomile. Bianca began casually mentioning elderly memory issues in conversation. My grandmother started forgetting things at your age, she said, while helping me fold laundry. That's why my mother had her sign over her condo early. Seniors shouldn't manage large assets for too long, you know. I nodded, playing the role of the declining older woman they expected me to be. In truth, my mind was sharper than ever, recording and analyzing their every move. The cameras revealed what I suspected. At night, they searched through my belongings. Dylan examined my mail. Bianca tried on my jewelry. They talked about speeding up the process in hushed tones. On the 14th night of their stay, I was heading to bed when I overheard them in the living room. I paused in the darkened hallway, just out of sight. Dylan's voice was clear, punctuated by a snicker. Mom's definitely slowing down. Soon she'll forget everything. Bianca laughed softly. Once she signs the papers, she can forget whatever she wants. I didn't react. I didn't confront them. I simply returned to my room, locked the door, and wrote in my journal. Day 14. They think I'm aging by the day, but I'm remembering every moment. After Thomas died, the house grew unbearably quiet. No shoes by the door. No newspaper rustling in the morning. No voice calling my name from another room. In that stillness, Goofy came into my life, a small, scruffy schnauzer with intelligent eyes and a crooked tail. He wasn't a replacement for what I'd lost, but he filled the empty spaces with something new. For 12 years, he'd been my constant. While Dylan grew distant, while friends moved away, while neighbors changed, Goofy remained. Every morning began the same way, a wet nose nudging my hand, dark eyes watching expectantly until I stirred. Every night ended with his warm weight at the foot of my bed, his soft snoring a lullaby that helped me sleep. Dylan never liked him. That annoying dog, he'd mutter when Goofy barked at his arrival. Why do you keep that troublesome mutt? When Goofy once chewed one of Dylan's expensive shoes left carelessly in the hallway, he'd suggested putting it down, as if Goofy were a broken appliance rather than a living creature. On the 16th day of their stay, I woke to silence. No wet nose against my hand, No expectant eyes, no gentle weight on the mattress. Goofy? I called, my voice still rough with sleep. No answering patter of paws. I checked under the bed, in the closet, the bathroom. I walked through the house calling his name, looking in all his favorite hiding spots, behind the couch, beneath the dining table, in the laundry basket. Nothing. In the kitchen, his food bowl remained full. His water dish was still cold, untouched since I'd filled it the night before. He hadn't been here since bedtime. Dylan sat at the breakfast table, scrolling through his phone as if nothing were amiss. "Have you seen Goofy?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. He barely looked up. "I let him out this morning. Don't worry about it." My heart dropped. Let him out? But he never goes out alone. He's too old. He can't find his way back. Bianca entered the kitchen, already dressed in an outfit too formal for a day at home. "That dog was barking all night," she said with an exaggerated yawn. "Affecting my sleep. You should thank Dylan, Mom." My hands began to shake. I gripped the countertop to steady myself. "Where did you let him out?" I asked Dylan. He shrugged. "Just opened the back door. He ran off." I knew he was lying. Goofy could barely manage the back steps anymore, let alone run off. And he would never have left voluntarily. I stood very still, absorbing the reality of what they had done. This wasn't just cruelty. This was a message, a demonstration of power, a test of how far they could push before I broke. "I see," I said softly. "I understand now." Dylan and Bianca exchanged glances, perhaps surprised by my calm reaction. Inside, I made a silent vow. This was the final line. They had touched something sacred. That night, I sat in darkness, holding Goofy's old blanket. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears now. There was only cold, clear certainty. I opened my notebook and wrote in red ink, Day 16. They have acted like monsters. Now it's my turn. The next morning, I began my true counterattack. First, I examined all the medication they had been giving me. Behind the safety packaging of the calcium supplements, I found tablets that didn't match the product description. In the sleep formula, I discovered a powdered mixture that wasn't listed in the ingredients. While Dylan and Bianca were out shopping for baby items, I searched their belongings. In Dylan's car glove compartment, hidden beneath a manual, I found a package of prescription-strength sleeping pills, enough to put someone my size into a dangerous coma. I spent the afternoon researching legal documents. I learned about non-binding agreements, conditional signatures, and methods to nullify contracts signed under duress or manipulation. I contacted my actual lawyer, leaving a detailed message about my concerns. When they returned, I began my performance. "Where did I put my glasses?" I mumbled, even though they were on top of my head. At dinner, I forgot to turn on the stove, standing confused in front of raw ingredients until Bianca pointed out my error with a poorly concealed smirk. I left my keys in the refrigerator and acted surprised when Dylan found them. "Oh my," I said with a vacant smile. "How silly of me." The effect was immediate. They exchanged triumphant glances. "Mom, you seem a little confused lately," Dylan said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Maybe we should get that paperwork done sooner rather than later?" Bianca nodded eagerly. "You don't need the stress of managing a house, Mom. Why don't you sign the power of attorney papers tomorrow, for peace of mind?" "Perhaps you're right," I said meekly. "I do feel foggy sometimes." Their plan was advancing faster than I expected, but so was mine. Late that evening, I passed the living room on my way to the kitchen. Dylan sat alone at his laptop, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. He didn't notice me pausing in the shadows. The form on his screen was unmistakable. Premium life insurance registration for seniors over 60. The fields for beneficiary information were filled with Dylan's name. The coverage amount, $2,000. I retreated silently to my room, locked the door, and for the first time since I'd overheard their phone conversation, I allowed myself to cry. Not from sadness or fear, but from the shocking clarity of what I was facing. My own son wasn't just after my house, he was planning my death. With shaking hands but resolute heart, I wrote in my journal, Day 17. They intend to kill me. After discovering Dylan's life insurance forms, I understood that defense alone wouldn't save me. For 3 weeks, I'd been their victim, reacting, observing, enduring. Now it was time to become the hunter. I wouldn't confront them directly. There would be no dramatic showdown, no police involvement yet. I needed irrefutable evidence first, and I needed to weaken them from within. In my journal, I wrote, Phase 2, Erosion. My plan was simple: gradually destroy their physical health while eroding their mental stability. Make them too exhausted, too confused, too sick to execute whatever they were planning for me. The kitchen became my laboratory. I started volunteering to cook all meals, a suggestion that Bianca, now permanently exhausted from her fake pregnancy, eagerly accepted. "You're an angel, Mom," she said, stretching out on the couch. "I just can't stand long enough to cook anymore." "Of course, dear," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You need your rest." I planned a weekly menu featuring dishes that looked delicious but were designed to create long-term discomfort. Monday began with extra cheesy mac and cheese, loaded with 4 types of high-fat dairy. Tuesday featured thick cream of pumpkin soup, rich with heavy cream and excessive salt. Wednesday brought crispy skinned roast chicken, the meat beneath saturated with butter. Thursday was garlic bread fried in clarified butter until golden brown. Friday featured processed meats, bacon-wrapped hot dogs, and sodium-packed deli cuts. Every meal ended with my special pudding, so dense with sugar it made your teeth ache. Dylan devoured everything. "Mom's cooking again," he told Bianca with a wink, "just like when I was a kid." But this wasn't the food I'd made for my child. This was calculated chemistry. To each dish, I added subtle ingredients known to induce mild drowsiness and mental fog. Star anise in the mac and cheese sauce, extra potent cinnamon in the pumpkin soup, wormwood oil, just a drop, in the chicken marinade. None enough to taste strange, all enough to accumulate in the system. I kept these herbs in my old tea canister, a perfect hiding place. If they searched my kitchen, they'd find nothing suspicious. Within days, I noticed changes. Dylan began dozing off in the afternoon, something he never did before. He'd wake confused, irritable. His temper flared over minor inconveniences, the Wi-Fi briefly disconnecting, a door squeaking, the neighbor's lawnmower. "What's wrong with me?" he muttered one morning, holding his head. "I keep losing my train of thought." Bianca wasn't faring better. Her sleep became restless. She complained of strange dreams. I played the doting mother perfectly, ensuring they never suspected me. I complimented Bianca's pregnancy glow and straightened their bedroom daily. Every afternoon, I brought Dylan tea on a tray, serving it with motherly affection. "Honey lemon tea, just how you liked it as a boy," I'd say, watching him drink it without hesitation. Bianca began calling me Mom with genuine warmth, believing she'd broken my spirit. Sometimes she'd pat my hand patronizingly. "You're the sweetest mother-in-law anyone could ask for." My control extended beyond food. I replaced the filtered water in the dispenser with water infused with dried orange peel and licorice root. Harmless in small amounts, but causing mild bloating with continued use. I cleaned the bathrooms with concentrated peppermint essential oil, making the enclosed space subtly disorienting. The strong mint vapor caused almost imperceptible dizziness, nothing anyone would attribute to cleaning products. I switched laundry detergents to a brand with an intense floral scent that I knew would irritate Dylan's sensitive skin. He'd always had mild eczema as a child, a fact he'd probably forgotten. The physical effects became increasingly noticeable. Dylan complained of insomnia despite sleeping 12 hours a day. I close my eyes but never feel rested, he told Bianca, unaware I was listening from the hallway. Bianca developed a mysterious rash on her neck and arms. She was constantly hungry yet felt bloated after meals. Her temper shortened. She snapped at Dylan for breathing too loudly. It must be the weather, she insisted, or the stress of moving. While slowly deteriorating their health, I gathered evidence of their crimes. When Dylan left his laptop unattended, I plugged in a small USB drive and copied his search history. I recorded suspicious conversations with a voice-activated device hidden in a decorative box on the mantel. I photographed the sleep aid bottles Bianca had hidden in her suitcase lining, prescription medications not in her name. One afternoon, while dusting the living room, I noticed Dylan had left his laptop open. Glancing over my shoulder to ensure I was alone, I read the browser tabs. Expediting life insurance claims for elderly dependents. Heart failure medications untraceable in autopsy. Legal precedent. Missing persons in wilderness accidents. My stomach turned, but I kept my composure. I took photos of the screen with my phone, careful not to touch anything. That evening, I returned to my bedroom and locked the door. From my drawer, I removed Goofy's last photograph. His intelligent eyes seemed to follow me as I pinned it above my bed. "It's time, boy," I whispered to his image. "They took you away. Now I'll take everything from them." On the 23rd morning, Dylan approached me with unusual warmth. His complexion was sallow from weeks of my special diet, dark circles under his eyes despite all his rest. Bianca hovered behind him, her skin dotted with the unexplained rash that now spread across her collarbone. "Mom," Dylan said, his voice gentle but eyes calculating. "We've been thinking. You've been cooped up in this house too long." Bianca stepped forward, placing her hand on my shoulder. "We feel terrible about how tense things have been. Let's get away for the weekend. Go hiking, breathe some fresh air. A family outing." I looked up from my morning tea. Chamomile, not the special blend I'd been serving them. "A hike? At my age?" Dylan smiled. "There's a beautiful trail at Sable Ridge. Easy walking, gorgeous views. It'll do us all good to get out of the city." Ah, Sable Ridge, known for its treacherous cliffs and isolated trails, the perfect place for an unfortunate accident. "That sounds lovely," I said, feigning emotion. "I'd like that very much." In my mind, I thought, finally, they're making their move. I spent the next day preparing. While they thought I was packing comfortable clothes and sensible shoes, I was actually preparing 3 separate meal containers. Mine contained a simple chicken sandwich. Theirs contained the same, plus a carefully measured dose of the sleeping medication I'd found in Dylan's possession. His own medicine becoming his undoing. Into my backpack went items they wouldn't expect a fragile old woman to carry. A folding knife, flashlight, basic survival tools, and a small vial of heart medication in case of emergency. During my marriage to Thomas, we'd been avid hikers. For 5 years after his death, I'd continued with a local hiking club, completing wilderness survival training. Skills Dylan had apparently forgotten I possessed. Saturday morning, we drove to Sable Ridge. I sat quietly in the back seat, pretending to doze while secretly activating the GPS location tracker on my phone and setting the emergency SOS function to automatic. Dylan parked at a nearly empty lot and led us to a trail I didn't recognize from the official map. "This way," he said confidently. "It's a local secret, much less crowded." Bianca smiled. "This spot is completely private. No one will disturb us." I nodded appreciatively, noting how they exchanged glances. The hike was strenuous, more so than they'd described. Dylan kept a firm grip on my elbow, guiding me along narrow paths that wound higher into the mountains. After an hour, we reached a rocky outcropping overlooking a steep ravine, a sheer drop of at least 300 feet. Let's rest here, Dylan suggested. The view is spectacular. I leaned heavily against a tree, breathing hard, not entirely pretending to be exhausted. Dylan quickly unzipped his backpack and pulled out a water bottle. Here, Mom. It's electrolyte water. Good for your energy. I took the bottle, pretended to sip, then let my hand tremble enough to spill most of it down my shirt. Oh dear, I mumbled. I'm so clumsy. Are you feeling all right? Bianca asked, moving closer, her eyes darting toward the cliff edge. I swayed slightly, then slumped to the ground. Just dizzy. Need to sit down. They both knelt beside me, concern on their faces. Not for my well-being, but for their planned success. I have some energy bars in my pack, I said weakly. Could you get them? The sugar might help. As they reached for my backpack, I pulled out 2 wrapped bars I'd prepared the previous night. Here, I said. You both should eat something too. We'll need energy for the hike back. They took the bars without hesitation, Dylan biting into his immediately. Bianca followed suit. I watched as they chewed, swallowed, completely unaware. Within minutes, their movements became sluggish. Dylan's eyes widened as he tried to stand, but found his legs unresponsive. Bianca slumped against a rock, her pupils dilated, mouth working soundlessly. What? What did you? Dylan's words slurred. I stood up, strength returning to my limbs, the hunter revealing herself. Don't worry, I said calmly, wiping my hands on my hiking pants. It's just a sedative, the same one you've been trying to give me for weeks. Their eyes followed me as I gathered my backpack, checked my GPS, and confirmed my route down the mountain. I leaned close to Dylan's ear. Don't worry, I'm not going to kill you. I'll let nature teach you about survival instead. In my journal, I wrote, Day 23, returning silence to the mountains. I followed the trail back alone, unhurried, confident. Near the trailhead, I heard a faint groan from a side path. An elderly man lay there clutching his ankle. Blood seeped through his hiking pants. Help, he managed, slipped on loose gravel. I knelt beside him, checking his injury, a bad sprain, possibly a fracture. I called emergency services, giving precise coordinates. In the ambulance, I learned his name. Leonard Cross, CEO of Cross and Bell Capital. I kept my situation to myself, saying only that I'd been hiking alone when I found him. When I returned home, I switched roles once more. I called 911, voice shaking with manufactured panic. My son and daughter-in-law are missing, I sobbed. We were hiking at Sable Ridge, and I got separated from them. I fell and hit my head. When I woke up at the hospital, they weren't there. 2 days later, search and rescue found them, severely dehydrated but alive. While they recovered in the hospital, I arrived with a slight limp, a small bandage on my forehead, the picture of a traumatized mother. Dylan looked at me with confusion and fear as I entered his room. Mom, what happened up there? I smiled gently, taking his hand in mine. I don't remember, sweetheart. I woke up in the hospital. I've been so worried about you both. The doubt in his eyes told me he suspected something, but he had no proof. And who would believe him? A model son planning to murder his devoted mother? Or a confused elderly woman who got separated during a family hike? He squeezed my hand weakly, and I squeezed back. Perhaps a little too firmly. The day after Dylan and Bianca were admitted to the hospital, I was arranging fresh flowers in my recovery room when a nurse poked her head in. Mrs. Ward, you have a visitor. Leonard Cross stood in the doorway, his ankle wrapped in a professional brace rather than the makeshift support I'd fashioned on the mountain. He leaned on a hospital-issued cane but otherwise looked remarkably composed for a man who'd been injured in the wilderness. The mountain angel, he said with a warm smile. They told me which room was yours. I straightened my hospital gown, suddenly conscious of my appearance. Mr. Cross, how's your ankle? Better, thanks to you. He approached slowly, extending his hand. I wanted to thank you properly. The doctors said if you hadn't found me when you did, exposure could have been a serious concern. His handshake was firm, his eyes direct. The confidence of a man who'd built an empire but hadn't lost his humanity in the process. Anyone would have done the same, I said. Leonard shook his head. Not everyone, Mrs. Ward. Not everyone. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card, embossed with the Cross and Bell Capital logo. I owe you dinner, at the very least, and a debt of gratitude. I accepted his card but made no promises. I still have some family matters to attend to. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course. The offer stands whenever you're ready. After he left, I tucked the card into my wallet. Connections like Leonard Cross could prove useful, but first I had unfinished business. When Dylan and Bianca were stable enough for visitors, I resumed my role as the concerned mother. I entered their room with shuffling steps, a slight limp, and a bandage above my eyebrow. The doctors had been puzzled by my insistence on the bandage despite finding no wound, but I'd mumbled something about feeling pain there. The couple looked terrible. Severe dehydration and exposure had left them gaunt and weak. Dylan's lips were cracked, his eyes hollow. Bianca's fake pregnancy pillow was gone, of course. A medical emergency leaves no room for such pretenses. Oh, my poor children, I cooed, rushing to Dylan's bedside. Mom, Dylan croaked, confusion clouding his face. Where did you go? What happened up there? I blinked, the picture of innocence. I woke up alone in the forest. I must have fallen. When I came to my senses, I was so worried about you both that I went looking for help. Thank goodness I found that injured hiker who had already called for rescue. Bianca's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Do you remember giving us energy bars before everything went blank? I widened my eyes, blinking rapidly. Energy bars? Oh dear, I don't remember any details. The doctor says trauma can do that. Erase short-term memories. I've been beside myself with worry. Dylan and Bianca exchanged glances. They suspected something but had no proof. Who would believe them over a distraught mother? I continued my performance flawlessly. Every day I brought homemade chicken soup to the hospital, accepting praise from nurses and doctors for my dedication. Your mother is an angel, a nurse told Dylan while I beamed modestly. The soup contained the same high sodium content and hidden herbs as my previous cooking. Nothing dangerous, but enough to ensure their recovery would be sluggish. Dylan developed persistent dizziness. Bianca complained of stomach pain and anxiety. When the doctors seemed concerned about their slow progress, I pretended to be distraught. Privately, I wrote in my journal, Phase 3, the ruins begin to show. After a week, Dylan was well enough to return to work. He dressed carefully that morning, determined to reclaim normalcy. I watched from the kitchen as he straightened his tie, trying to look like the successful businessman he'd once been. He returned 3 hours later, his face ashen. He collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. They wouldn't let me in, he said finally. Security stopped me at the lobby, said I was removed from the employee directory. I feigned shock. What do you mean? I called the executive office. All I got was a text message. Your contract has been terminated. No further contact necessary. His voice was hollow. 10 years there, gone in a second. I hid my satisfaction. Leonard Cross had moved quickly. Don't be sad, sweetheart, I said, patting his hand. Maybe it's for the best. I still have some money. I could help you two take a vacation. Change of scenery might do you good. Bianca, still wearing her bathrobe at noon, perked up immediately. That's actually a wonderful idea. We need time to recover mentally from that awful hiking incident. I smiled gently. I just saw a promotion for a 7-day Thailand tour. Beaches, relaxation, Exactly what you both need. They agreed eagerly. I handled the bookings, insisting they rest while I managed the details. What I didn't mention was that I charged everything to Dylan's credit card, the one he thought I didn't know about. The day they left, waving goodbye from their taxi, I didn't waste a minute. I'd already hired a moving company, scheduling them to arrive an hour after the couple's departure. Everything Dylan and Bianca owned was removed from my house. Their valuable items were donated to charity in Dylan's name, complete with official receipts for tax purposes. I changed every lock. I canceled their access to my accounts. I blocked their numbers on my phone. When they returned a week later, sun-tanned but still weakened, they found themselves locked out, their possessions gone, and a stack of bills totaling over $38,000 waiting in a sealed envelope at my doorstep. Along with it was a thick packet from their credit card company detailing their loan agreement and payment schedule. I heard the taxi leave. Then came the pounding on my door. When I finally opened it, I stood tall. No trace of the feeble woman they thought they knew. "What do you need?" I asked coldly. Dylan's face contorted with rage. "You tricked us. This is our house." Bianca threw a document at my feet. "You signed the transfer papers. We have proof." I smiled thinly. "Did you read the fine print?" That form was a transfer of intent template, with no legal value. Look at the bottom. "For display purposes only." Bianca froze. Dylan punched the door frame, his knuckles bleeding. I reached into my pocket and handed Dylan a sealed envelope. "This is your DNA test. You're not my biological son." His face went white. "What?" "You're the son of the woman who had an affair with my husband. I raised you, named you, gave you everything. But you never once called me mother, with real love." Dylan sank to his knees, almost sobbing. "No, that's impossible." I felt nothing as I delivered my final words. "I gave you every chance. Now you have nothing left to take. Get off my property. Pay your own debts." I closed the door on their anguished cries, turning the deadbolt with a satisfying click. The weeks after our confrontation passed peacefully. Through neighborhood gossip, I learned that Dylan and Bianca had rented a shabby one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. They were struggling to pay off the credit card debt from their Thailand trip, now compounded by late fees and interest. 3 months later, Bianca left Dylan. My former daughter-in-law, who had once envisioned herself mistress of my home, apparently couldn't stomach poverty. She departed while Dylan was at a job interview, taking what little jewelry they had left. Dylan's health deteriorated steadily. The combination of stress, poor nutrition, and perhaps the lingering effects of my special cooking left him with a mild heart condition and nervous exhaustion. He couldn't hold a steady job, drifting between part-time positions that barely covered his rent. I felt no triumph in his downfall, no burning desire for further revenge. The fire that had fueled me had burned clean, leaving behind only calm ashes. I didn't visit him, send money, or answer his increasingly desperate phone calls. My focus was elsewhere now. Every morning I watered my garden, adding new plants each week. I joined a book club at the local library. I redecorated my home, replacing the furniture Dylan and Bianca had touched with pieces that reflected my own taste. Warm colors, comfortable fabrics, nothing ostentatious. No trace remained of the perfect couple who had tried to claim my life. One sunny afternoon, while I was pruning my newly planted lavender, a familiar car pulled into my driveway. Leonard Cross stepped out, carrying a small potted orchid. Since our hospital encounter, he had become a regular presence in my life, not intrusive, but steadfast. He called to check on me. He invited me to dinner at quiet restaurants where we could talk for hours. He accompanied me to library lectures and, eventually, to a pottery class where we both created hilariously lopsided bowls that made us laugh until tears came. He never asked about Dylan. He never pried into family matters I wasn't ready to discuss. He simply offered companionship without demands. That lavender looks healthy, he observed, presenting me with the orchid. Thought your windowsill might like this. I accepted the delicate plant, our fingers brushing. Thank you. Would you like some tea? As we walked the garden path I had created, Leonard asked about my new bird feeder. My thoughts on the novel we were both reading, Anything But the Past. During an evening walk in the park a few weeks later, as autumn leaves crunched beneath our feet, Leonard turned to me. Helen, do you think you'll ever love again? I didn't answer immediately. The question settled between us, important but not urgent. I looked at him. This kind, patient man who had entered my life when I needed strength, but stayed when I found my own. I reached for his hand, clasping it gently. Perhaps I already have, without noticing. His smile was worth every difficult moment I'd endured. The following day, a mysterious package arrived at my door. Inside were internal documents from Cross and Bell Capital, showing Dylan's name systematically removed from all projects, his employee ID erased from their systems, his company benefits terminated. I understood immediately who had sent it, and why. When Leonard came for dinner that evening, I simply brewed a pot of tea, handed him a cup, and smiled my thanks. No words were needed. 6 months after I closed the door on Dylan, my phone rang with his number. I nearly declined it, but something made me answer. His voice was weak, raspy. Mom, I'm sorry. 3 words. After decades of manipulation, of using me, of seeking to replace my love with my wealth, all he could offer were 3 small words. You're right, I replied softly. You should be sorry. Then I hung up. I spent that afternoon on my porch, planting lavender, mint, and rosemary in decorative pots. Leonard arrived with tools to install a new clothesline and touch up the paint on my fence. We worked side by side, comfortable in our shared silence. When evening came, we sat on the porch swing I'd recently added, drinking tea and listening to jazz drifting from the small speaker Leonard had brought. No declarations were needed, no promises required. The sun cast long shadows across my garden as I watched a hummingbird visit the feeder Leonard had hung last week. For the first time in decades, I felt completely at peace. That night, I opened my journal to write one final entry. Day 100. I have stopped living for others. From today, I begin living for myself. And for the first time, I am not alone. I closed the book and placed it in a drawer. The story of Helen Ward, the sacrificing mother, was complete. The story of Helen Ward, the woman who finally claimed her life, was just beginning.